Hello, welcome to CrossCurrents, produced by the City of Fort Collins in cooperation with the Larimer County League of Women Voters. I'm Barbara Rutstein, the moderator for today's program. Our topic is solid waste. Can we do better? In other words, we're going to talk about trash, Larimer County trash, and what the future holds for the Larimer County landfill and the current efforts underway to deal with its closure in 2025. A committee consisting of stakeholders from Larimer County, Fort Collins, Loveland, and Estes Park have been meeting for some time and have engaged R3 Consulting Group to provide costs and benefits of a 2016 County Commission study to provide costs and benefits for the county and how to deal with solid waste and recyclables. Our discussion will focus on the current situation, options for the future, and the implications for residents and businesses when the current landfill closes in 7 years. The goal of Fort Collins is to divert all waste by 2030, which is only 12 years away. To discuss the issue on my right is Kelly Ohlson, former mayor and recycling activist. On his right is Ronald Wilkerson, solid waste project director for Larimer County. On his right is LeeAnn Davis, business owner of Canyon Utilities Services Incorporated. And on her right is Tyler Bandemer, Superintendent of Solid Waste for the City of Loveland. Welcome to you and to our studio and viewing audiences. First, I think we need some background. Ron, what has the county done to extend the life of the current landfill?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to say good evening, and it's a pleasure being here this evening. The county has been involved with several programs, and just to enhance just a little bit of what you said initially, I think the starting point here is that everybody needs to understand that the Larimer County landfill has enough life through 2025, as you mentioned in your introduction. The last expansion that was given by the state of Colorado was back in 2004, and we're currently in that expansion mode and working through the rest of the capacity that's currently at the Larimer County facility. I think collectively, this waste shed, which is all of our municipal partners and the county, have done a great job of diverting as many products as they can through programs that they've all supported. Namely, the Larimer County facility has started and initiated a green waste program, which was back in 2017, and they are now diverting all green waste materials, which includes clean dimensional lumber, pallet material, yard and leaf waste material, limbs, and land clearing debris.
Now, when you say they're diverting, when you say they're diverting the materials, what does that mean? Where does it go?
Yes, actually, when it comes into the Larimer County facility, it gets checked in at the scale house. And then if we have a clean segregated load of the materials that I just mentioned, they get moved to a separate reprocessing area. Mm-hmm. So we stage the material segregated by clean wood and pallets, brush, and yard waste. We have a processing company that comes in about once a quarter that processes all of the material to a mulch. And right now it currently gets moved to biochar. Biochar makes a soil amendment for agricultural reuse.
Okay, and tell us about a waste shed. What is that?
Okay, the waste shed basically is the whole entire region that is represented through the North Front Range Waste Shed Coalition. Our coalition is made up of stakeholders, the Technical Advisory Committee, the Policy Advisory Committee, and our Technical Advisory Committee within this waste shed has been studying all of the information that's been presented through our national consultant, HDR, and we basically look at all of the options that we're considering here tonight that include infrastructure options for new solid waste management facilities and recycling initiatives and all of the things that you have introduced.
Okay,
this
now does
evening.
the waste shed include Larimer County or Weld County?
It's Larimer County, and actually in our solid waste management study that included some of our solid waste volumes, we reached out just beyond the limits of the county, especially in the high development areas, to the south and east. So it crosses the line a bit, depending on where we're receiving the materials from. One, we have the Berthoud transfer facility, and we actually receive some waste just outside of the county there. We kind of feel like some of the materials are crossing the line in that section of the county near Johnstown, and it's actually coming into the Larimer County facility. So we encompassed all of that in this high-growth area within the waste shed, but it mainly consists of Larimer County and all municipalities.
Okay, so LeeAnn would use one of the transfer stations, is that right? How do you operate?
Well, we pick up trash from the high mountain areas. We haul them down to the Larimer County landfill and use those facilities. We are also involved in recycling. Those are very difficult to do in such a spread out area where we are. But the county has been very, very supportive of our efforts to handle recycling materials.
Okay. Now, Tyler, has Loveland done anything to try to increase? I know they've done a wonderful job with recycling, or that's my memory anyway. And so have you increased your policies on trying to do more?
At this point, we have not done anything new. Most of our stuff has been in effect for probably 20 years plus. I want to say back into the mid-90s. Some of the predecessors that before me did a really good job of making sure that recycling was number one, and then waste came after that. As far as recently speaking, we haven't changed anything. Some of that might be, I guess, resting on our laurels, if you will, but the way the program was set up so many years ago has just been remarkable in regards to. We do close to 60% of all the materials that are collected in Loveland, the residential materials, get diverted from the landfill. We've had a strong yard waste program for many, many years, which makes up a very large portion of that diversion rate. And then our single stream, and then our at the curbside, along with our yard waste collection at the curbside, and then our recycling center that's been kind of a gem for many years. We see close to 140,000 customers come to that recycling center every year, where we take over 25 different materials, from little AA batteries and AAA batteries and watch batteries, all the way up to big steel and trees, and I mean, you name it. We take all kinds of materials at that recycling center. I keep going back though. As of right now, we have not made any new initiatives. All these initiatives have been in place for many, many years.
Okay, Kelly, can they do more?
Who's they?
Well, any of the entities.
Yeah, I think we can always do better. I'm just very impressed with what is happening here with Larimer County taking the lead and working with the various partners, public and private, and I'm not easily impressed. I'm somewhat of a critic, and what I've been seeing and reading of what they put together is just a remarkable program, long overdue at all levels, but an excellent plan, and I hope we move forward with it. I do want to say that Loveland has been way ahead of Fort Collins for many, many years in their recycling efforts. There's a number of reasons for that, but the city of Fort Collins can definitely do better. I was involved in the Road to Zero Waste, which sounds real good. They hired real good consultants, national consultants, but the councils and the city organization's been pretty slow to move. So I would hope that they would spend less time patting themselves on the back and more time actually implementing the programs that were laid out in the Road to Zero Waste. So I think Fort Collins can do a lot more, and we all can as individuals as well. It starts with reducing our consumption, and then reusing things or making sure that other people can reuse those things before we even get down to the recycling thing. And I just don't want that lost in this whole discussion. It's reduce your consumption, be conscious of what you buy, and then try to reuse it before you even get to the recycle part of the equation.
Okay, well, Ron, tell us what's going on now. Tell us about this study that you've had going on for several years.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I've been here since June of last year. Had the pleasure of taking. I had the pleasure of joining this waste shed as the solid waste project director. In coming into this study, HDR, who's a national consultant, was on board with us at the time that I arrived. There were several main tasks and objectives in phase 2 of this study this year, and we're down to the last bit of it at this point. One of the main objectives was to establish goals for the waste shed, which we did. As a pretty significant placeholder in those goals, waste diversion was high in the ranking. So as we've gone through and looked at new solid waste facilities through all of the infrastructure options that have been analyzed for the last several weeks, high on that list was what percentage of diversion do those solid waste facilities bring, and how do we continue to manage a very progressive and a high-growth community that we're all experiencing, now and into the future through 2050. So the majority of our time has really been spent on new solid waste management facilities and the infrastructure options that we're currently analyzing.
Okay,
Yes.
well, now, LeeAnn, were you involved in this study at all?
No, we were not.
And do you know anything about it, or are you learning now?
No, I am learning.
Okay.
It's going to be very important for us to stay with the program, grow with the program, for all of the smaller waste haulers such as we are.
Okay, and were any waste haulers involved in the study or in this stakeholder group?
Yes, ma'am. Within the stakeholder group, Waste Management has been an active participant in the stakeholder meetings. GSI has been to at least one stakeholder meeting that I'm aware of, local hauler. And just to reach out to the haulers just a bit more, we got together as a technical advisory committee and decided to have a hauler meeting with some of the main haulers being Waste Management, GSI, and Ram Waste. And we actually held a separate meeting just for them and gave them an update on all of our waste shed progress over the last several months.
Okay, now, maybe I'm misinformed, but I was under the impression that Waste Management had their own facility in Alt.
They do.
And do they use the Larimer County landfill?
They do some,
Some.
yes.
And so would they be involved in anything new that came on board?
Potentially. Well, we have a private-public relationship with Waste Management. They actually operate our material recovery facility, which accepts all of the single-stream recycling from residential and commercial businesses. So they're somewhat of a part of the central part of our facility anyway. They do haul some construction and demolition material to the Larimer County landfill and also some MSW, municipal solid waste material, to the landfill.
Okay, very good.
Yes.
Anybody have anything they want to contribute? Go ahead, Kelly.
Sure. I just want to touch on the first question, extending the life of the existing landfill. Of course, all of the communities and as individuals, we can do better with what we consume and what we toss out or what we recycle. But I think we don't want to lose sight of the fact that eventually, whether we stretch it 3 more years or even 4 more years, and you and I both know how fast, since we got elected 35 years ago next month for our first time to the City Council in Fort Collins, that we've got to be planning in a much broader window than even if we extend for 3 to 4 months. Just as a little perspective, I did a little research, and when I The year I was born, Larimer County was 43,000 citizens. We're now at 340,000, so it's gone 8x, 8 times the size. And this one's really scary. Fort Collins, 1950 was 15,000, and we're now at 170,000, so we've grown 11x. So whether we extend 2 to 4 more years, we have to be looking out for the next number of decades here, and it's about time.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
I just wanted to say, going back to Kelly's original statements, when we formed this waste shed back in 2015, I don't know that our goal was to impress anybody. Our goal was to make sure we were doing the right thing and be ahead of the game. We knew 10 years, which seems like a long time, in certain, especially when you're planning for something like this. But we knew that 10 years was going to come and go really fast. And go back and what I said, we weren't looking to impress anybody other than just do a really good job of making sure that the future of waste handling in this region was done right. And the fact that we did impress Kelly, as he said, he is a professional critic. That's awesome for us. And I think it goes to show that the work that Ron and our entire technical advisory group coalition has done has just been top notch. Our consultants. So, I appreciate the compliments from Kelly.
Okay, and the communities have bought into this, is that correct? Loveland, Estes Park, Fort Collins, and obviously the county.
I'll defer that to Ron, but I will say that we haven't. I mean, we do have representation on our PAC, our political advisory committee from each one of the communities, council members, and they buy into it from what I can say, but as far as going for the ultimate buy-in from the full council, we have not gone that far yet.
Okay.
And I'll defer to Ron on if he's got any more on that.
No, Tyler, that's great. And I've been involved with waste shed studies and regional studies in the past in other areas. And I've been super excited and very proud to be in this group from a technical advisory committee standpoint. It's not easy to do things by committee. And this technical advisory committee with all municipal partners has been a pleasure to work with. We've got a wide array of experience across many solid waste management avenues. It's been super refreshing for us to kind of come together and vet all these options out and make some decisions that we wanted to push forward to our stakeholder group. And then, as Tyler had mentioned, onto the policy advisory committee group. And everything that we've taken to each of those groups since I've been here, the general consensus has been overwhelming in support of the things that we've carried forward. And I think that's a testament of the Technical Advisory Committee's experience and the embracing of all the goals and objectives of this coalition to move this thing forward.
And the Technical Advisory Committee is city staff members?
It is.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so now let's talk about some of the options.
Sure.
One of them is another landfill. Where is that going to be if we have another landfill?
Well, the county back in 2006, I believe it was, purchased approximately 640 acres in the north section of Larimer County. That was taken down as kind of a placeholder, if you will. And as Tyler mentioned, things don't happen overnight in the solid waste management field. Somebody had a crystal ball out and thought at some point in time that Larimer County landfill was going to close, and we needed a potential space to move the landfill to in the future. And the one thing that I wanted to mention about recycling and reclamation, there's not too many programs out there that involve reprocessing or in any of the infrastructure options that we considered that don't have a residual waste that has to be landfilled. So no matter what you do moving the pendulum forward for solid waste management activities, every study that I've ever been involved with surrounds a landfill. Now, it might be smaller, or the future for that landfill might be that we're not going to do another one. We're going to divert to the highest potential that we can divert to. And when we close that landfill, we'll have all the end markets in place to recycle all the products that we're looking to recycle. But the landfill is the key infrastructure piece moving forward while we try to stay nimble in this solid waste management field to do all the things that everybody wants to do.
Okay, so what would it look like? Would it look different than the one we know now? Would there be facilities built on there?
It would be different. And as we've talked to our technical advisory committee and others, this landfill, if it gets developed, is going to be more of a transferred material landfill. So let me explain.
Yes.
Our central facility on South Taft Hill Road, where the current landfill is, also involves all of the other infrastructure that has been there for several years. An HHW program for household hazardous waste.
Okay.
Okay. Recycling for single stream, which gets picked up at the curb, which is cardboard and plastics and jugs and aluminum cans. And the waste diversion for yard waste. The county has also integrated into their program an inner debris recycling and reprocessing area for concrete, brick and block that gets crushed and reused as a recycled stone. So there's a lot of infrastructure already there. And as everybody probably realizes, we take over 700 vehicles a day into that facility. Approximately 500 are self-haul, so residential individuals like us bring a lot of recycling and their MSW and/or construction demolition waste to that facility. And then we're currently servicing over 200 commercial loads of MSW, which is municipal solid waste.
Okay.
Thank you. Keep correcting me. I'm sorry for using the acronyms. And construction and demolition materials. So the intent for the new facility in the northern section of Larimer County, if it gets approved and it gets developed, is to move the transferred materials that come into the central facility into a central transfer station. So let me explain. One of the infrastructure options for consideration is central transfer station. It's basically a large building that has a concrete floor and a lot of roll-up doors. The smaller loads of material in the smaller trucks come in and they deposit either their garbage material or their construction and demolition if we don't choose to reprocess it. They push it into a much larger truck, and that transfer truck gets hauled to potentially the new Larimer County landfill facility. And so it becomes more of a transfer waste facility, accepting materials in larger loads. Because the existing facility is so centrally located within the county, we couldn't expect, and people wouldn't do it even if we expected it, to haul those individual loads that are coming from Loveland and Fort Collins into the central facility all the way to the north section of the county. So we have to provide some convenience for our existing customers to continue to bring the waste to that facility, push it in a much larger truck, and haul it to a new facility much further away.
Okay, how would that affect your business, LeeAnn?
Well, we currently use the landfill on the south side. If the landfill gets moved to the north side, that will not affect us a whole lot. We have to travel one way or the other. We have 2 large trucks and 3 smaller trucks that service the high mountain areas. And so we travel a good portion, a good distance every day. We run all 4 of those trucks every day for our services. My question is, are we just going to always continue moving this trash? Where does it end up? Has anybody given thought to disposal of the trash?
Okay, who wants to tackle that?
Well, it's a very good point. The disposal of the material needs to be moved, obviously, to an alternate facility. And the new Larimer County potential landfill facility in the north section of the county would be the receiver of the materials that we wouldn't recycle or reprocess. So
Okay.
basically, your trucks would continue to come into the central facility on South Taft Hill Road, and we would accept those trucks, and they would deposit their materials on a floor, and we would push those into a larger truck just for an economy of scale. It's cheaper to move the material from a smaller truck to a much larger truck and haul it to a facility like the new potential Larimer County facility in the north section of the county. So we may, at that facility, at the new facility, accept possibly just some of the generation of garbage materials and other materials in that section of the county. But the point here is that we don't want to put 700 vehicles a day that are used to coming to the central facility on the road going to the northern section of the county, because it doesn't make sense. There's different economies of scale, and that's why we have as one of our main infrastructure options, central transfer station.
Okay, so actually, then we know we're going to have a landfill, and we know we're going to have a rather large transfer station.
Yes.
Okay,
That is true.
okay. Do you have another question?
Well, I'm just curious if there's been given any thought to the gasification units, the biomass conversions. I know that our very small company looked into that. 4 or 5 years ago, we did we submitted an application, National Science Foundation, for a grant to buy a biomass converter. Turned out, well, we were declined, of course. We're way too small for that. But it seemed like such a good idea that various transfer locations could have these biomass converters. And I'm kind of curious about what the studies have shown on those.
Kelly, do you have any information on that?
Well, I'm not by any means an expert, and there's some smaller scale specific things of different kinds of materials that have had more success. But as far as just the, and I don't know that that's what you're implying, just the trash to energy or something, they just haven't come to fruition. Like it bankrupt one county in Pennsylvania that tried to get there. We should, and I see that it's on the list in here to continue with the technology, so you're right, we should be continuing to look at all the technological changes taking place, but my recommendation would be is you go after the low-hanging fruit first, which is, for example, the construction and demolition processing facility that this group is talking about, the yard waste organics processing facility that they're talking about, also the clean materials, the new materials recovery facility, the clean recoveries facility, kind of like the one we have now for recycling, but a considerable notch up where there's less contamination and those kinds of things. So I think the way I would look at it is, of course, we want to keep up with the technology, but we've got to do the low-hanging fruit that are both that are less risky, less expensive, that have more bang for the buck, and then eventually maybe through the decades evolve into the other, and it might be faster than that, into the other technologies. And some of the smaller scale technologies are getting pretty close to there, but as far as just, I would never support just, and no one's implying this, just bringing the trash trucks in and throw it in something that is some magic machine that with no pollution that creates energy. That's not the way it works. It just doesn't work. And I'd always be for taking those resources out first anyway, because we're probably not going to have time to get to that. But I would caution or encourage the two people here working on this proposal to get the information out to the public of why recycling is important, because the list is about twice as long as it was when I started in this in the 70s about the advantages and the benefits to recycling, and there are basically close, with very few exceptions, occasionally here or there, but 99% of recycling is beneficial. And I think we need to really let people know, and just one example of that is how we've gotten more sophisticated in the data. Just in the air and water pollution, It creates a net reduction in 10 major categories of air pollution by recycling and 8 major categories of water pollutants. And that's just 2 of the dozens of benefits of recycling. So I hope that doesn't get lost in this. And I also don't want to come across as anti-technology because I'm not. But I have studied that. There's smaller options that we can look at, but not at the extent when 30% of it, and I think that might be low right now, of construction waste is construction and demolition, and another huge chunk is the yard waste and those kinds of things. We don't want to go after and I know you weren't suggesting that, so I'm not being critical in any way, but we don't want to go after the shiny things and miss the real obvious ones.
I have a question about yard waste. I understand branches, but do people still bag their grass clippings? I thought we weren't supposed to do that. Tyler?
Sure, I can take that. People do still, we actually find grass clippings in recycling containers sometimes, because people do have this idea that, well, it is kind of recyclable, so I'll go ahead and put it in there and somebody will get it out for me. And so you've got the bag full of green waste or yard waste, but yes, people still do bag their yard waste and throw it in the trash. In Loveland, for years, we have offered access into our recycling center where you can drop off your grass and leaves for free. And if you don't want to bring it down for free, we will come to your house between April and December and pick it up for a fairly low fee every week. And we have 45% of our residents in Loveland that subscribe to this to the subscription-based service that could take it down to our site for free, but they want us to come to their house. But yes, going back to your original question, we do still see it in the trash, and we also see it in the recycling containers.
Now, is that an education issue?
Absolutely. I think everything with recycling and diversion is an education issue. The more education we can get out there, the more we will see. We'll see higher diversion rates everywhere.
Yeah, but this isn't really diversion. From what I've read, I think they tell you to leave your grass clippings on the grass because they're good for the soil. I mean, is that wrong?
No, it's not wrong. I mean, composting and, whether it's doing a mulch blade on your mower or taking your grass and leaves and putting it in a mulch bin in your backyard, both really good ways to divert your grass.
Okay. Now, who would own the trucks that were going to take this stuff from the transfer station to the landfill in the north?
Haven't determined that, obviously.
Okay.
Typically, with other transfer stations that I've been involved with other counties, that is a private-public type relationship where a subcontractor will provide the trucks for so many years and so many tons to haul them at a certain location. And typically, that's what takes place.
Okay, now another thing that was in part of your study was food waste. Do we do any of that now as far as specific, disposal, I guess you would say?
Fort Collins has a ordinance, and I'll call it more of a process controls ordinance, where they basically say for grocery stores that they want the grocery stores to divert their food waste. So they have certain collection vehicles that get subcontracted that move the waste to a composting facility.
And where is the composting facility?
I don't know exactly if it's just one, but it may be the A1 composting facility, which is over in Eaton.
Oh, okay, so it's not at the Larimer County landfill?
It is not. It is
Okay,
not.
that's what I wanted to know.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I know that Denver does some of that because my daughter has a little green box by her sink. and certain things go in there, but we're not doing anything like that. Are we planning on that?
We're diverting the green waste materials that we're getting at the Larimer County facility currently to go to the biochar facility that I mentioned earlier. But one of the main infrastructure options that Kelly alluded to, and he did a very good job of doing that, is a yard waste and potential food waste composting facility that could be constructed at the central facility on South Taft Hill Road.
Okay. Let's see.
And going back to food waste, I know Ron mentioned, I don't know all of Fort Collins' whether it's an initiative that they've got or a code as far as the grocery stores go. But you'll find a lot of companies, it could be the company, whether it's a Walmart or a King Soopers, that they've got their own internal initiatives to compost or set up programs like that.
Okay. Well, now, how much is this going to cost people? We need to get into that. LeeAnn, do you have any idea what your customers care about?
Well, our customers, since we have, from the inception of our recycle program, we've reduced our trash pickup by about, I'm going to say 4 to 1. We do pick up a lot of recycles, but it's a perk for our customers. They pay extra for their recycling, and it's only offered to our current customers. I'm suspecting that as we diversify even more, offer the subscription-based yard waste removal, there'll be extra charges for those branches. Yes, I think our customers are expecting to pay a little more for their recycling. The more we recycle, the more they're going to have to pay.
Mm-hmm.
But then the less they pay for the garbage pickup, so.
Yes. Okay.
Could
What
I-
about cost?
Yes, could I go back and just kind of re-review or at least pick up on where Kelly left off on some of the other infrastructure options?
Oh, of course.
That I think are extremely important
Sure.
to point out here this evening. We've discussed the central transfer station, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed the new county landfill. Some other considerations, very important to Kelly's point on low-hanging fruit, and I'm glad he used that terminology. We use it all the time. Construction and demolition waste incoming to
Oh, yes.
the Larimer County facility. We're currently taking about 120,000 annual tons per year. Now, that is mixed construction and demolition material. In other places that I've been, we've been successful in recycling 70 to 80% of that material. So in doing that, one of the main infrastructure options for consideration is a construction and demolition processing facility. So much like the central transfer station being an indoor facility, it's also an indoor facility where we direct all the mixed construction and demolition waste with concrete, clean wood, roofing material, gypsum wallboard material, and it hits a screener that screens some of the material out, and it hits what they call a picking line that source separates all of the materials that we choose to pull out for higher and better use.
I
guess
see.
that's the way to say it best.
And would that be on Taft Hill Road?
That could be on Taft Hill Road, the most central location again
Uh-huh.
at that facility. Looking at the yard waste composting facility, and I'll brag on Tyler's program, they're currently doing about 26,000 annual tons of yard waste. The city of Fort Collins is doing about 16,000 tons of yard waste. And the Larimer County facility is bringing in approximately 15,000 tons of yard waste. So a central yard waste composting facility at the South Taft Hill Road facility could be a perfect location for that type of composting operation so that we could divert the 55 or 60,000 tons of generation through all of our municipalities and the county for a higher and better use again. And anaerobic, excuse me, I got off point. The food waste composting static area bin technology is basically taking the yard waste portion of the compost and adding it to and integrating the food waste organic to it. And we process this material in a static area bin, which is basically just a concrete bin in a building where you control odors, you mix it at a 1-to-1 ratio, and you develop even a higher end composting amendment for other uses. So that could be where some of the food waste gets diverted to at the central facility again. So you're looking at yard waste composting, food waste composting potentially, construction and demolition reprocessing. And when we pull down all of that material, you're looking at another potential 40% diversion from what gets currently buried in the Larimer County landfill. And there's the other material recovery facility that Kelly also mentioned that is an existing facility, and we plan on doing nothing with that facility. We'll continue to reprocess the single-stream recycling at about 40,000 tons per year, which is what you had mentioned also. Now, there may be an upgrade in the future there, depending on whether we gather more tons and we can bring them through the facility and meet a higher threshold for contamination. But there could be an upgrade of that facility as well, but we continue to offer that service over time. So as we pull them down, Central Transfer Station, New County Landfill, construction and demolition processing, yard waste composting, food waste composting, and potentially clean MRF upgrade are the infrastructure options that we carried forward through to the stakeholder group and our policy advisory committee most recently, and got general consensus across the board to move those into the final stakeholder meeting and then on to the public.
Okay, so what about air pollution? Will these various things, I think I read that the landfill is the third highest emitter of greenhouse gases in Larimer County. Will these facilities affect that at all? Who can answer that?
Well, obviously, landfilling just overall, especially in an environment that we're in today, where we have an active coalition that wants to reprocess and recycle, the best thing that we can do to eliminate potential air quality issues are to reprocess and find a higher and better use for these materials. So in doing so, the air quality issues that you mentioned are not a concern moving forward, especially for construction, demolition, reprocessing, composting, and things of that nature.
Okay, let's see. What kind of costs are we looking at? Does anybody have any idea about that? Tyler, is Loveland looking at the possibility of higher rates?
You know, anytime we look at, like, especially the upgrades that we're looking at, new landfills cost a lot more money. The current landfill, we basically dig a hole and bury our trash. The new landfill will have to have an engineered containment system, which a lot of, it's in the name, engineered. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it. The costs,
Explain that. What kind of engineering?
and I don't know, Ron might have to pick up on this a little bit, but once you dig the hole, you've got to have different layers at the bottom, and you've got to have a liner that goes in there
lining.
that basically catches any water, anything hazardous that goes into that landfill will never leach into the groundwater, hopefully. So you've got to line your new landfill. The cost of that is you know, I don't know how much higher, but it's extremely. The costs go up once you have to do all these sort of things. But when we looked at this, and Ron can give the numbers as to, you know, potentially what the costs are, but when Loveland looks at this, and you see that if we go from, say, $22 a ton for disposal right now up to $40, I'm sorry, I might be misquoting these numbers, and Ron can correct them, but even if we double the cost of landfilling, that cost does not double the cost to our residents. When we have a budget, I mean, we've got the costs of trucks in there, we've got the costs of employees, we've got the costs of just operating every day. Landfilling is one small portion of that. So when we look at that, our costs will go up. I think you mentioned the numbers earlier, that we may see anywhere from 6 to 7% increase to 11 to 12% increase, somewhere in there. Because we have to consider, like I said, our entire budget is everything we do, and landfilling is one portion of that.
Right,
So.
right. Okay. Yes, Kelly?
I'd just like to piggyback on that, because we always have to, we look at these costs, and this might be in the tens of millions of dollars, which actually, when you're talking about a county the size of Larimer, that's not really a large number, and a lot of these things aren't really an option, where we might be acting like these are we have the option or not. We're going to have some place for the recycling and or the waste to go. So it's just how we go about doing this. It's not really an option. And the other thing I want to touch on, that people never look at the other side of the equation in economics, which are the externalities, et cetera. There's a large cost. Here's one little statistic on the recycling, a national recycling rate of 30% reduces greenhouse gas emissions to the total of 25 million cars off the road. And so you're talking about climate change, you're talking about air quality, you're talking about water quality, you're talking about the mining of raw materials, which is ruining of view sheds and habitat destruction and impacts on wildlife, and I could go on, but I won't. But the point is that we always get stuck in this, well, how many millions is it going to cost? And nobody ever looks at, well, what's it going to cost if we don't do this, which the costs are far greater, and we don't really have options. We proceed wisely or we proceed stupidly, but we have to go forward with a new landfill and a new way of doing waste, and I think we're heading in the right direction. So it's not like we have an option of the null alternative. That just isn't there.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, Kelly makes really good points. I'm glad to be sitting beside you this evening. It's important to point out that there's no cheap option, obviously, with surviving facilities, and I've managed facilities that had closed landfills, and then you have a new transfer station and potentially a new landfill somewhere else, so you have additional transfer costs, as Tyler alluded to. And we're looking at, across the board, several $1 million of capital cost improvements. And I'll just review very quickly. Central Transfer Station, around $14 million. New county landfill, just the first 15-acre phase, around $12 million. Construction demolition processing facility, $14 million. Yard waste open windrow composting operation to handle 60,000 tons of material, around $10 million. Food waste static area bin composting facility, another $10 million. So as we look at these costs and as we analyzed each of the infrastructure options, we didn't just pick these top 5 out of the air. We analyzed a lot of criteria. And in doing so, capital cost was one of the criteria. Mm-hmm. That capital cost converts to a price per ton. So one of the price per tons that we've looked at for the central transfer station is around $31 a ton. And as Tyler alluded to, his residential impact for that $31 a ton is around 6%, because he has much more cost to pick up the waste through the capital of the trucks and the containers and the labor and so forth. But we have to realize the fact that currently our tipping fee is around $22 a ton. And if our new cost for the central transfer station is around $31 a ton, then are we going to get the same amount of volume, or is the volume going to go to an alternate facility? So we're in a market analysis currently with HTR. They're looking at capture rates based on these new tipping fees, potentially, to see what the difference in our capture volume is going to be for each of the solid waste management waste streams that we've studied, which is also extremely important. But recycling comes at a cost. It's typically more than it is for disposal. We happen to operate in an area where we have very cheap tipping fees. So for us to arrive at a collection of facilities that will reprocess and divert materials, and it can be supported through a county program through this coalition, makes me so proud to be a part of, because typically you have disposal at $22 a ton, and that's where all the material is going to go. But with our facility replacement fund through the county, that has amassed several $1 million, we can buy some of this capital down and make it more affordable to our customer.
I see.
And that's extremely important moving forward. And to conclude on these things, the rest of what we're involved with right now before we go public with this study is, does there need to be some sort of governmental controls to help push recycling to facilities, either ours or somebody else's, so we can keep our diversion number high, as everybody wants to within the coalition?
Right. Well, is there another alternative nearby?
There are alternatives for composting. A1, for instance, there is the Hageman facility.
Oh, yes.
That's on the opposite side of Fort Collins that does some composting as well.
Right.
So there-
Leaves and grass and branches.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, and he actually accepts some clean dimensional lumber for grinding and mulching and things of that nature. So there are some facilities local, but as we pull down the collection of these reprocessing options, end markets are so extremely important to the presence and the permitting of these sites. And they just, again, don't come out of thin air. If we put down a construction and demolition reprocessing facility, we have to have end markets for the clean wood, the gypsum product, the metal product, the cardboard, the concrete, the fines material, all of the things that will come out of that, we have to have end markets for. So it is pricing is extremely important, and also end market development is extremely important as we move forward, and we're cognizant of all those things.
So is there a chance that you could actually recoup some money from some of these operations?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
And we're looking at that in the analysis, and HDR has done a fantastic job of looking at the potential for these reprocessed items to have value. Okay, so the clean wood, if you grind it up and you mulch it, could have a value, or you put it in your compost as a composting agent for bulking material. The crushed concrete that Fort Collins is involved with, and also that Loveland's involved with.
Is that for road material?
For road material,
Okay.
driveways, things of that nature. Once it gets reprocessed, it can be sold for some additional revenue as well. So, yeah, all of these things are being looked at, soup to nuts, all the way through this process.
Okay, I think we have a question.
I think this is on. I'm Sue Ellen Markey, and I have a question. I live in just outside the city limits, but I have a question. I guess I'm not clear. For Canyon Utilities, I just simply don't understand why it's preferable for her trucks to drive to the old landfill dump or whatever, instead of being able to use a northern facility. So that's one quick question, and I guess it has to do with all this infrastructure stuff. But it seems to me that gets at some of the pollution issues. She's got to drive these trucks, and it's going to cost her gas and everything. The second question is, and I'm not lobbying to be the local recycling police, but where does all the stuff that cannot be reprocessed in one of these infrastructure projects that you've been talking about? I'm thinking like plastics. Doesn't all that have to be trucked somewhere? And where is it trucked? Goes back to LeeAnn Davis's question of where does it all end up? And I'm wondering if you could quickly answer those two.
Go ahead.
Please do.
Sure.
As far as our trucking to one landfill location or another, because our service area encompasses from the very south part to the very north part, we have to drive one way or the other. And so actually the south location is better for us because the greater portion of our route pickup is in the south. But our trucks are going to have to drive one place or the other.
Okay, quickly on the plastics.
All good questions. The plastics actually get recycled and segregated through our material recovery facility. Depending on the makeup of the plastic, they could be sent various and sundry ways. As most of you all are aware, nationally, most of our plastics and mixed paper products have been imported into China. China has a huge take on the American market for a lot of these recyclable materials. But they've added a lot of additional criteria, I'll say, to this process in that they've lowered their contamination threshold. So now we're looking at more markets more locally to divert some of those materials. And I can't answer your question specifically on where that plastic goes and how it's used, but the majority of that material has been imported into China.
Okay, and I thought I read that they had stopped doing that, maybe only for certain people, but I thought that they didn't want that anymore. And it's pretty awful seeing it in the rivers there. Do you have a comment? Let's finish up with a final comment.
Okay.
And whatever you would like to say, but just about a
Okay, well,
minute
this
or
is all,
less.
this is all very exciting, and it's great work, and I've seen a lot of plans through the years, including many recycling plans, and I hope this doesn't become like most of them, which is a plan and not a lot of action. I don't sense that, actually. I believe this will result in some action. I believe the resources are there, but it's all very exciting. That's one. And then in getting to the question that was asked, we still have to work long-term. It's not the low-hanging fruit, but it's not magically the trash. There's a need for a landfill because we have to work on these hard-to-recycle materials where there was just a mattress recycling event in Fort Collins. But think of all the roofing after the hailstorms and the roofing materials. Those all go into the landfill. There's things like that, the carpets that are torn out when people redo their carpets. That's a massive amount of volume, just huge when you think of that in Fort Collins alone. So there's the hard-to-recycle material, so hopefully we'll get to that someday as well. So I'm just very excited about this, and I just want to leave people with the final thought that solid waste is no different to the infrastructure and a role of government than stormwater and wastewater and water and electrical and roads and bridges. It's very much intertwined and just as important as those other things. And recycling is part of that waste management. And we're going to have some waste for a while, so we got to think of it as part of the infrastructure. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Ron. I'm interested in your education campaign, actually.
Well, I just wanted to close by saying, as I've said earlier, that very extremely happy to be here, very extremely happy to be a part of this study. And I really do believe that the TAC, the PAC, and the stakeholder group is taking all of the comments received early in this study and has wrapped them all up and developed goals and objectives through 2050 that has allowed us to arrive at these top 5 facilities, which I've been involved with 1 or 2 at any given central location, but I've never been involved with all of these collectively at one location to work down off of a goal that has over 40% diversion. So extremely, extremely proud of that.
Okay, LeeAnn.
Well, I'm excited about being part of this group as well, because more and more people are moving to Colorado. As more and more people do, more are moving up into the mountain areas. Our trash problem is just going to grow, and so it's exciting that all these plans are being made early.
Okay, Tyler.
Thanks again for having us. I gotta go back to some of Kelly's statements there that I don't think this plan is going to stop. I don't think we have an option at this point. You know, the fact that 2 years ago we saw this coming, and like I said, at that point it was like, wow, we seem like we're a little early, but we weren't even close to a little early. I think we were right on time, and the fact that we have such ability to impact the future of solid waste in this region is a really, really neat opportunity. The fact that we've been able to look at all these infrastructure options and, you know, going after some things that do seem like low-hanging fruit and trying to vet through some of these things that are very innovative but too expensive to really go after. And we do kind of come back to some of the older methods, but still tried and true, but still going after some of the newer things too. The potential for this is just remarkable. But yes, I will harp that we have to continue our education campaign, and that is one initiative that we are doing in Loveland every day. Right, we're starting that more and more, trying to improve that, because I'm not sure that we can have a huge impact on the landfill, the current landfill, as far as you know, diverting more material to keep it alive even another year or two. We may be too far gone for that. But if we can, we are trying.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. Thank you to our panelists, to our studio and viewing audiences. And if you'd like to see this program or any other CrossCurrents programs, that you can go to the League of Women Voters website, and you can also look at Channel 14, or this also will be repeated on YouTube. So there are ways to see this again or to tell other people to see it. Thanks a lot.